It was raining again. The kind of slow, heavy rain that makes the world quiet. I sat on the edge of my bed holding our wedding photo. The frame felt cold in my hands. In the picture I was smiling so wide. You'd think I was the happiest woman in the world. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 37 years old and I live in a small suburb in Ohio. From the outside my life looks peaceful, maybe even perfect. A cozy little house. A husband who's been with me for almost 2 decades. Neighbors who wave when they see me. But that night, staring at that photo, I felt something break inside me. I had been feeling different lately. Not sad, not angry, just empty. Like I was watching my own life from a distance, too far away to feel anything. Mark, my husband, was downstairs watching TV. I could hear the sound of his laughter mixing with the rain. I used to love that sound. Now it just made me feel like I was living in 2 different worlds. The one everyone else saw and the one inside me. I thought about the way we'd been together lately. We still ate dinner side by side. We still shared a bed. We still said I love you out of habit. But something was gone. Something that I couldn't even name anymore. I don't know when the change began. Maybe it was months ago. Maybe years. It was like living inside a house with beautiful walls, but no roof. Always waiting for the rain to come in. That night I almost asked him the question that had been stuck in my throat for weeks. Are you happy with me? I wanted to hear him say yes, even if it was a lie. I wanted to believe that we were still the same people who had promised forever. But before I could speak, I heard him call my name from downstairs. His voice sounded different, softer, almost careful. I walked down slowly, my heart beating too fast for no reason I could explain. When I reached the living room, he looked at me like he'd been thinking about something for a long time. And then, in that quiet, steady voice, he asked me something I never expected. Last night I almost left. But then he asked something that made my whole body go cold. From the outside our life was gentle. Mark would wake before me, make coffee and leave mine on the kitchen counter. 2 sugars, no milk, just how I liked it. He'd kiss my forehead before heading to work and I'd pretend to still be half asleep so I wouldn't have to talk. Every weekend we cleaned the house together. He'd vacuum while I dusted and we'd laugh about how we'd turned into that old married couple. Sometimes he'd buy me flowers on his way home, small bunches wrapped in paper from the grocery store. I'd put them in a vase, smile and say, they're beautiful. But beauty is strange. It can sit right in front of you and still not touch your heart. For a long time I told myself I was lucky. Lucky to have a stable home. Lucky to be loved. Lucky to not be lonely. But somewhere inside a quiet voice kept whispering, this isn't love anymore. It's just life. One Thursday evening we were having dinner. Baked salmon, roasted vegetables, wine in the good glasses. Mark was in a good mood talking about work and a funny thing his coworker had said. I tried to listen but my mind kept drifting, watching his mouth move, wondering what he wasn't saying. Then halfway through dinner he put his fork down and leaned back in his chair. He smiled, that same warm smile I felt for years ago, and said, you know, our 20th anniversary is coming up in 2 years. I was thinking, maybe we should renew our vows. Make it special. I froze for a second, then forced a smile. That sounds nice, I said softly. But in my chest there was no excitement, only a strange heaviness. Later that night I cleaned the table and took the trash out. When I came back inside, Mark's jacket was hanging over the back of the couch. It had started raining again and I didn't want it to get wet, so I picked it up to hang in the closet. As I slipped my hand into the inside pocket, my fingers touched something. A small folded piece of paper. At first I thought it might be a receipt. But the paper was soft, worn, like it had been carried around for a while. I pulled it out. There, in delicate handwriting I didn't recognize, were just 5 words. I still think about you. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My hand started to shake so badly I almost dropped it. I looked toward the kitchen. Mark was humming to himself, washing dishes like nothing was wrong. I stood there holding the note, my heart beating in my ears. It didn't look like a coworker's note or a casual message. It felt personal, intimate. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be from another woman, or if I was terrified it might be from someone else entirely. He made me dinner. I said thank you. Then I found something in his jacket, and my hands started shaking. I didn't sleep that night. The note sat on my bedside table, its words burning into me every time I looked at it. I still think about you. Who would write that to my husband? And why did the handwriting feel familiar? Took me a few hours to realize why. It was the way the letter Y curved, sharp then soft at the end. It reminded me of him. Daniel. I hadn't spoken his name out loud in more than 18 years. But in my head it was still there, clear as the day we met. I was in high school, 17, the year I thought the world revolved around summer nights and love songs on the radio. Daniel was my first real love, tall with dark hair and a smile that made my knees weak. We met at a coffee shop where I worked part-time. He came in every Thursday, always ordered the same thing. Black coffee, 2 sugars. The first time he asked me out, my hands were shaking so badly I spilled milk on the counter. He was the kind of boy who made the world feel bigger. We talked about running away together, living in a tiny apartment in Chicago, starting a life before we turned 20. We'd stay up all night talking about the future, about kids, about growing old together. We had a plan. Until one night he was just gone. No call. No letter. No goodbye. Just silence. For weeks I waited for him to show up at my door. I told myself there had to be a reason. But when months passed I gave up. I told myself I'd never forgive him for disappearing, but the truth was I just couldn't stop loving him. A year later I met Mark at a friend's party. He was nothing like Daniel. Steady, reliable, gentle. The kind of man who'd make sure the door was locked at night, who'd fix a broken chair before you even asked. I was still hurting, still broken, and I think Mark saw that. He never pushed. He just stayed. And little by little I let him. When he asked me to marry him 2 years later, I said yes without hesitation. Not because I had healed, but because I wanted to believe I had. The years passed quietly. We built a life. I never mentioned Daniel again. Not to Mark. Not to anyone. But sometimes when I smelled a certain cologne or heard an old song, I'd feel that old ache. I'd tell myself it was just memory, nothing more. Then, for years ago, I got an email. No subject line, just one sentence. I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't open it. I deleted it without reading. I told myself I didn't need answers anymore. But now, holding that note in my hand, my heart told me otherwise. I looked at the handwriting again, tracing the letters with my finger. It had to be him. And if it was, that meant Daniel had found a way back into my life through my husband. Why would Mark have this note in his jacket? Had they met? Had they spoken? Had my whole marriage been sitting on top of a secret I never knew? The thought made me dizzy. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Mark slept beside me. In the dark, his breathing was calm, even. I wondered if he was dreaming of me, or if somewhere in the back of his mind he was still thinking about the note too. I buried the past. Until it found its way back to me, in my husband's pocket. The morning after finding the note, I told myself I would act normal. I made coffee the way I always did, placed his mug on the counter and smiled when Mark walked into the kitchen. I even leaned forward and kissed his cheek before he left for work. It felt strange, almost like I was performing a role I had learned years ago. After nearly 2 decades together, it was surprisingly easy to wear a mask. I kept telling myself I would confront him soon. Just, not yet. The days that followed were heavy with a kind of silence that wasn't comfortable. We spoke about grocery lists and bills. We laughed at a silly video on the news one evening. From the outside, nothing seemed different. But under every conversation there was a weight pressing down on me. At night, I would hear the sound of the shower running upstairs and wonder if he was thinking about me, or about someone else. A week later, I met my friend Lisa for coffee. Lisa had been my closest friend since college, and she had a way of seeing through me no matter how hard I tried to hide. We sat in our usual booth at the cafe on Main Street. She asked how Mark was and I shrugged. She tilted her head, studying me for a moment, and then leaned in. You look different, tired. Like you're carrying something heavy, she said. I laughed lightly, trying to brush it off, but my voice wavered. Lisa's expression softened and she lowered her voice. You look like someone carrying a love that doesn't belong to you anymore. Her words sank deep into me. Guess she was right. I had been carrying 2 loves for years. The one I had with Mark and the one I lost with Daniel. I didn't answer her. I just sipped my coffee, staring at the steam rising from the cup. That night, Lisa's words wouldn't leave my mind. I sat on the couch scrolling through old photos on my phone while Mark read upstairs. Thought I was alone. I called Lisa, speaking in a whisper. What if the man you love was never who you thought? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then you deserve to know the truth, she said quietly. I heard footsteps in the hallway. The creak of the top stair. My head turned toward the sound, and in the shadows, I saw Mark standing just beyond the light, one hand resting against the wall. He didn't say anything, just stood there for a moment listening. Then without a word he turned and walked back into our bedroom. I stayed on the couch, my heart pounding. That night I lay in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I wanted to reach out, shake him awake, and demand answers about the note, about Daniel, about everything. But I stayed silent. Because deep down I was afraid of what he might say. She said I looked like someone carrying a love that wasn't mine. That night I realized, maybe she was right. 2 nights after I saw him standing in the hallway, I decided I couldn't carry it any longer. The note had been living in my drawer like a secret I was afraid to touch, but it was also eating away at me piece by piece. That evening we ate dinner in silence. I pushed food around my plate, barely tasting it. Mark kept glancing at me like he wanted to ask something, but he never did. When the dishes were done, I sat at the table, my hands resting on the wood, my heart pounding in my ears. Mark, I said softly. He looked up from drying the last plate, and something in his eyes told me he already knew what was coming. I took a deep breath. I found a note in your jacket. He didn't speak at first. He set the plate down, placed the towel on the counter, and came to sit across from me. I wondered when you'd say something, he said finally. His voice wasn't angry, it was tired, almost sad. Who wrote it? My voice shook despite my effort to keep it steady. He looked down at his hands, turning his wedding ring slowly. Daniel, he said. The name hit me like a punch. I gripped the edge of the table. You've spoken to him? Mark nodded once, still not meeting my eyes. Years ago. He reached out to me, not you. He said he needed to explain something about the past. He wanted me to tell you. My chest felt tight. Why didn't you? Mark's shoulders rose and fell. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I gave you that letter, you'd read it and realize you still loved him. Afraid you'd leave. I stared at him, stunned. You kept this from me, all these years? He swallowed hard. I thought I was protecting us. I thought if I could love you enough you'd never go looking for him. I didn't want to lose you to a ghost. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My mind felt like it was splitting. Half of me wanted to understand his fear, the other half wanted to scream. But I didn't scream. I didn't even raise my voice. I deserved to know, I whispered. He nodded slowly, his eyes finally meeting mine. I know. And I'm sorry. But I think I always knew that part of your heart was never mine. We sat there in silence for a long time. No shouting. No accusations. Just 2 people realizing that love wasn't enough to fix what had been broken years ago. I stood up, feeling the weight of 18 years in my bones. I walked toward the door and reached for my coat. Emily, he called softly. I turned back. His eyes were full of something I couldn't name. Not anger, not even regret, just release. Thank you, he said, for not lying one last time. I left. And as I closed the door he said, thank you for not lying one last time. It has been 7 months since I walked out of our house for the last time. I now live in a small apartment on the edge of town. The walls are white and bare, the furniture is simple, and the air is always quiet. At first the silence felt unbearable. Now I'm learning to live with it. In the mornings I make my own coffee and drink it by the window, watching strangers walk their dogs or hurry to work. Some days I go for long walks without a destination. Other days I stay in bed until noon, reading or writing in my journal. Healing, I've learned, is not a straight line. It's slow, uneven, and often lonely. There are moments when I miss Mark. Not in the way I used to love him, but in the way you miss a familiar rhythm. The way you miss hearing someone ask if you want tea before bed. But I don't regret leaving. I think we both knew it was the only way to set each other free. Last week on a rainy Thursday afternoon, I found an envelope in my mailbox. There was no return address, just my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen in almost 2 decades. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The ink was slightly faded, the words simple. Emily. I'm sorry I disappeared. I was young, scared, and I thought leaving was the kindest thing I could do. I never stopped thinking about you. I hope you found the life you deserved. Daniel. I read it 3 times before I set it down. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there holding the letter, feeling the weight of all the years between then and now. Eventually the tears came, not for him, not for Mark, but for the girl I used to be. The girl who loved with her whole heart and didn't know that love alone wasn't always enough. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. I didn't feel the need to write back. Some stories don't need a second chapter. That night, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, the rain tapping against the glass, I thought about everything I had lost, and everything I was slowly gaining. Freedom. Clarity. Myself. If you've ever loved someone so long that you forgot who you were without them, I want you to know, you're not alone. Somewhere out there, someone has felt exactly what you're feeling now. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go. If you've ever felt like me, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments.